All right, y'all. Welcome to the Unfazed, Unedited podcast, where we provide commentary on complicated topics in an uncomplicated format. I'm Dr. Shauna Payne Gold, and I go by she, her, hers pronouns. And Dr. Lisa, I know that we usually try to make sure that we are staying up with the times, but
Hmm.
yeah, this has been an interesting day as we look forward to Artemis 2's splashdown, but
Yep.
yeah, we got a lot going on. We love when astronauts are home safely, and at the same time, there's lots to unpack there, along with the exact ass opposite of fun and joy and competence and kindness in the world that we also need to talk about, right?
Yeah, quite the split screen, isn't it? But yeah, I'm pretty nervous for these astronauts. It makes me the idea of them coming in at that speed with those temperatures. Whew.
Yeah, I'm one of those challenger kids that actually saw it in, I believe I was in fifth grade. I need to double check with some of my classmates, but I believe we were in fifth grade. And so all of it makes me nervous. Like it's like Mr. Victor, the pilot, he said, I won't completely exhale until splashdown. I'm like, amen, my
Oh,
brother.
I
That's where
bet.
I
I
am too.
bet. Yeah.
All of them are Gen Xers as well. For Christina's 47, and I think two others are 50. So all
Yep.
Gen Xers.
I loved
And
that
I'm
about it
like,
when I saw that. I was like, yes.
exactly. So I'm like, oh my gosh, I mean, I'm not military trained, so they know how to compartmentalize. I cannot compartmentalize at the moment. So anyway, hopefully by the time you've heard this, you've seen a beautiful splashdown, and our four fellow humans back here at Earth. So super excited about that. But all right, Dr. Lisa, let's get started with the word of the week. So let me tell you, I have been reading, I want to say frantic dissertations. Sorry, doc students, but some of y'all are frantic, and I'm okay with that. But frantic dissertations as we're moving towards May, June graduations, and so forth. And I was reading specifically in one study about the strong Black woman schema. And the reason why that was curious to me, Lisa, was because you and I have already talked about the Superwoman Syndrome on this podcast and in just general conversation. And so I'm thinking to myself, what is different between the two of them? Because we've discussed them before. And the Superwoman Syndrome was defined as an intense pressure to balance work, family, and personal life that's often linked to perfectionism and self care neglect, right? So we've talked about that a bit. We've talked about self care in its own right.
Yep.
And
Yep.
so now that we're at this SBW schema, the strong Black woman schema was developed by Dr. Cheryl Wood Giscombe, if I'm pronouncing the last name correctly. And it's an extension of the syndrome in that it adds a few more aspects to it.
Okay.
SBW adds that there's this obligation, I don't know to who, but obligation to show strength, suppression of emotions, resistance to vulnerability, or any type of dependence, caregiving, and striving for success. And that definition, I was like, oh my goodness gracious, this is very interesting to me because I cannot help but think that obviously this has been generationally formed, generationally formed.
Yeah. Yeah.
And with that, part of it is straight up survival. You know, when you think about the nasty, dirty stain of slavery in this country and who had to handle the aftermath, the during math, all of it was Black women holding families together after Black men being stripped from them, which meant that they were the staple of the family. You know, most families have a mother, a maternal figure, or what we would call a big mama of the family. Like that's where everyone kind of gravitated to them because they were the mainstay of the family. And so translate that, you know, generational feeling of being a mainstay in your family due to the stain of slavery and put them in a professional environment today. Like I think that's why, Lisa, do you remember when someone said, was it Drew Barrymore that said some slick shit to Kamala Harris during an interview about, we need a mama love for the country, like we need a mother for the country, and how
Yes, I remember that.
offended, remember that?
Mm-hmm.
And how offended people were. I think that kind of gave even more scaffolding to what actually needs to be torn down around, okay, why is this default setting that
Yeah.
SBW schema has to happen, and anything other than that is not truly being a Black woman, or uh, softness, or vulnerability is now a detriment. Like, I've even caught myself listening, or even saying this prideful mantra of, they're a strong Black woman, I'm a strong, but what happened? I'm like, hell no, 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 thank you.
Mm,
I am not buying what you're selling anymore. Not that I can't and haven't been strong, but I get the choice of whether I want to
right.
be,
Right.
especially in a certain setting. And so, anyway, I bring this up as an extension of what we've talked about before, Lisa, but I just thought it was very important to think about as we have our 92 percenters that are saying, hey, we were even strong for y'all at the polls, and we see how we're treated contextually. We are choosing to not be strong for this country anymore. We're choosing to step away or create rest environments that work better for us due to our current socio-political context. So I'm letting this mull around for me, Lisa.
Yeah, I know we've talked about the superwoman identity before, and we've also had a conversation about what is that? Is it black girl magic? Right? We've talked about that too, and the ways in which
Mm-hmm.
these kind of I don't know what you would call it, catchphrase, idiom, like the way that it's affirming and supposed to be empowering, but also can have a
Yes.
pretty detrimental side in terms of self care and kind of seeing yourself as someone who is, like you said, vulnerable and makes mistakes, and that's all okay and part of what it means to be human, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Just, seeing oneself as a human being, I think
Mm-hmm.
that's the counter narrative. Like, that's the
Yeah,
interruption
yeah,
of,
yeah,
why don't I get to sit down? Why don't I get to not be worried about other people? Or,
yeah.
now I'm being treated as someone who's not a quote unquote team player because I'm choosing to simply focus on my work rather than
Mm-hmm.
everybody's work.
Yeah.
It's a little countercultural here. So I thought I would highlight that and just continue to keep this thought on our radar here.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
All right, so let's get into phase one. All right, so Lisa, let me tell you, I've got a bone to pick with a athleisure wear company
Okay.
called Actively Black. And I'm saying that facetiously. The only reason why I got a bone to pick with y'all is because I've been looking at that purple set for 2 years now, and it's never in my size. Okay. I mean,
Okay.
their line is incredible. It's beautiful, it's functional, comfortable. But Actively Black is a Black owned athleisure wear company that was founded by Lanny Smith. And this came across my radar. I already knew about the company, but
Mm-hmm.
it's a Black owned brand, and they have some major commitments to our community. Of course, as it sounds, Actively Black, the physical fitness community, their
Mm-hmm.
priority is also mental health, healthier food access, and also HBCU athletics. So all four of these are so in line with damn near everything connected to social determinants of health as it
Yep.
pertains
Yep.
to Black folks. So that's a reason enough to adore the company. And so when I see an Instagram post where they're kind of, it's like an apologetic post, meaning that they're apologizing for offending some, but also justifying a decision. And come to find out, the company had launched a line, and they do collections all the time on specific things. Like, even, for example, their cotton collection, where they're actually using cotton from Black owned farms, which is a total mind twist when you think about how just,
Yeah.
intergenerational that is. But they
Yep.
also had this recent line called Black Women Are Superheroes. It's a collection. Black women are
Mm-hmm.
superheroes. And I'm thinking, okay, that's cool. You know, I'm the hesitant Gen Xer that's like, okay, so what's the big deal? I mean, we hear this all the
Mm-hmm.
time. We hear the Black girl magic. We hear this, but who has what to say about it? And there was a cadre of Black women that mentioned the pain and the exhaustion and the burden of feeling like they have to always save everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And how the line kind of reinforced this, oh, we're the ones that always have to go above and beyond. We're the ones that are actually human beings, but we always have to display this, let me sacrifice myself to save everyone approach to life. And I'm thinking to myself, well, of course. I mean, yes, I feel that way often about a lot of things. Black girl
Mm-hmm.
magic, you know, Black women are superheroes. Even as I know it's meant to be a beautiful compliment,
Yeah.
I also
Yeah.
understand the undertones of that, right? And so then the founder goes on in this multi-frame post saying that the collection was inspired by his mother, Alfreda Smith, who raised him. And this is interesting. She was a powerhouse in and of herself. Since we just finished talking about Artemis too, his mother worked in computer programming in the
Okay.
South in the early 80s. And she was inspired, in fact, by the Hidden Figures astronauts in
Mm.
space. And so, with that, all this trickles down into, gosh, I stand in awe of my mother. Why not make a
Yeah.
great collection around standing in awe? Again, another compliment to another Black woman. And so, with that, what I thought was interesting was this dichotomy of folks that were like, I appreciate the compliment, but I don't know if the compliment is the compliment doing more harm than good because it's
Mm-hmm.
reinforcing this superhero notion when we don't want that anymore, or some of us don't want that anymore. And so, with that, I thought it was just curious, and I wanted to bring it up to you to think about because, you know, now there's a lot of things that are counter to this superhero sentiment around Trisha Hersey Rest is Resistance book and all of that
Mm-hmm.
movement, the National Day of Rest for Black women, which is annually on March 10th, this soft life trend that you will see across social media, and specifically combating health disparities among Black women, all these different things where we're like, no, we're not sacrificing ourselves no more. We're not going to do it. Um, it's hard for me to hold because I'm like, shoot, I want to be able to take a compliment, but is this the type of compliment I want to take? I don't know. But what do you think, Lisa, from the outside looking in? Oh, I don't know. I feel
Yeah.
sometimes.
Yeah, I see why it's conflicting. And as you and I always talk about, language really matters. And,
Yes.
sometimes I do think maybe not we, you and I, but we in the royal sense can, blow up the impact of language that becomes unproductive. Um, and so part of me wants to say, well, it's individual, right? So if a Black woman takes inspiration and empowerment from the Black Women as Superheroes collection, then great, so be it, all for you. And if someone else finds it offensive, or maybe not offensive, harmful, then that's okay too. I mean, I guess it's like I'm familiar with Black women, superheroes, superwoman, that archetype, right? So I find it surprising that the founder of this organization was not previously aware of it when naming this, right? So was this an education for him, or had he had the conversation around, yes, there's this archetype that exists and it can be negative and it puts a lot of burden on Black women, but I want to honor my mom, and so I'm weighing the pros and the cons, and for me the pros outweigh the cons, and that's what I'm doing? Or was he completely oblivious to the fact that this even exists? Do you know?
Based on the posting that I went back and looked at, I'm like, well, here's the thing. This is not the this is not the first launch of this collection. He launched the collection got a little bit of backlash, and I believe he pulled it for a little bit. And then after conversing with some folks, his mother, so forth, he said, you know what? Putting it back. It's still because by
Okay.
the time I got to the end of the reel, it was back up where he said, yeah, people can go out and get the, a piece from the collection here. So I'm like, okay, at least there was some consideration once it was brought to his attention that this may be problematic. I appreciate that part because it's still thoughtful. And he can do what he wants to do with his business. But I thought that was very curious. Very
Yeah,
curious.
so he launched it, brought it back, chatted with women, including his mom, and then decided to relaunch it. So obviously they came to some kind of conclusion that the issue wasn't worthy of pulling down the whole collection. So I would love
Right.
to have been a fly on the wall for those conversations.
Those conversations. Yeah.
The other thing that's curious to me, and I don't have this, this is not a well formed thought, but the fact that it's athleisure, that's the type of clothing. There's something happening for me that I can't put words to related to that. You're nodding like maybe there's something there. I can't, yeah.
Well, now, okay, so here we go again, y'all, with our diagramming sentences, diagramming words, right? It's like, yeah, there is something quite powerful and superhero-ish connected to anything athletic, like that makes you feel strong. It makes you feel like you did
Mm-hmm.
something that maybe you questioned whether you could do. All right, that connection to a superhero makes complete sense. Absolutely. And at the same time, it's like, okay, are we in balance with the athlete superhero and the leisure half of not needing to feel like I need to be a superhero? I don't know. I'm still figuring that out. But yes, there's I think there is something to the athletic part of it.
When you say, if I would just say to you outside of this conversation, Shauna, what is the first thing that comes to mind when you hear athleisure clothing?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what's
Mm-hmm.
the first image that comes into your head?
Oh, athleisure, something very soft and comfortable while I'm sitting on the couch. Like something to
Okay.
wear, very soft and comfortable. Yep.
Okay, so it's not the part of it that comes
Right.
into mind, right? It's the leisure part of it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think about like affluent white women, right, strolling
Oh,
around
mm-hmm.
in their athleisure, their
Lululemon.
yoga pants. Yes, yes. So there's just this weird juxtaposition around actively black is the brand, black women are
Ooh.
superheroes is the collection, athleisure is the category that conjures more leisure than athlete. And then also this kind of, for me, this background like whiteness, affluence, Lululemon thing. So yeah, like I'm not connecting the dots exactly, but there's something happening there that I can't quite pass through, but it feels weird.
Well, and what's interesting, I just went back to look at the post. I'm gonna pull back something I said. I
Okay.
can't say he talked to his mother. He specifically said that he talked to so after much deliberation, getting advice from several Black women that I admire and trust.
Okay.
After changing my mind so many times about this, I'm making the decision to bring
Okay.
back our Black women are superheroes during April Black Women's History Month. So didn't speak to his mother, but spoke to women he trusts. Um, so here's what I propose based on what you just shared is that I don't know how long Actively Black is in business. I can look it up while you're speaking, but it may be, in fact, a not countercultural, that's not the right word I'm looking for, but it can be a point of defiance to say, why does athleisure only have to be for white women?
Right.
Like that in and of itself, athleisure only being for white women can kind of be, this is the interruption to say, oh, so white women are the only ones worthy of sitting down and being leisurely or athletic? Like that white women have a choice where Black women have not.
Right.
We're as actively Black, we're trying to give them the choice to be either athletic or leisurely, depending on whatever they want. That is an interruption.
Yeah, an interruption. And then with your point about this right to rest and rest is resistance, right? The fact that
Mm-hmm.
leisure comes to mind more than athletics, when we think about athleisure clothing, there's also that message that, yeah, Shawnee, you can sit in this outfit and watch TV and you're still a superhero, right? Like the superhero mantra or name or accolade doesn't have to be, is not exclusive to women that do 1900 things in a day, right? So
Mm-hmm,
there's that
mm-hmm.
piece of it too that's kind of curious to me. Like, so is there something subverting? I don't know
Right.
whether this was intentional on his part or not, but like there, I feel like there's a deeper disruption, to use your word, that's happening there with the
Mm-hmm,
collection of
mm-hmm.
names and language and styles.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Well, and there's, there's the other piece too with it. With the athleisurely piece of this work, it's who gets to rest. Usually it's not
Mm-hmm.
Black women
Right?
without critique. Who
Yeah.
gets to rest? Usually it's not Black women. Who gets to applaud Black women? And in this particular case, it happens to be a Black man that's the
Mm-hmm.
co-founder of or founder of this line. And then it's no longer no longer asking permission to do either.
Right.
Like no longer asking permission to do either. And I think it's this cumulative effect of agency. Maybe that's just the big word for it all. It's the agency
Mm.
piece of it. Like I want this is funny yet not funny, y'all. I saw something on Instagram where it's this guy talking that said, "Yeah, nowadays when you break up with a woman, she no longer cries about it." And it went on with this little montage where it's like, yeah, women don't stop. And not to say that women don't have feelings. I'm not saying that. But
Right.
what he was trying to insinuate was women no longer feel like the victim in such a situation. They move on with their lives, or they go, they take agency to be with who they want to be with, or if they feel like being petty and tit for tat, oh, you want to go out and sleep with somebody? I can do the exact same thing because
Yeah.
I have
Yeah.
agency over my body. Like it was insinuating that there has now been a huge shift from perceived lack of agency to full blown exercise of
Mm-hmm.
agency.
Mm-hmm.
And it might just be agency. I get to determine what I want to do or not do with my life,
Yeah. Or we could just be reading way too much into it.
as we always do.
Yeah.
As we always do. But no, I think the agency piece of it, I
Yeah.
do see now that you're
Yeah.
bringing this up with leisure and how
Right.
it's perceived. Like it's, I think I talked with you about this before, Lisa, where somebody was in one of my triathlete uh, Facebook groups, and she was training for either half or a full iron, had children, family, what have you, and was complaining about not having enough time, not, something about the training around the time it takes to do the training. And then somewhere in the comments, eventually she mentioned that she was a stay-at-home mom that also had a nanny, that had somebody to come in to cook for her, like these other things. And the Black women that I know who are also in the triathlete community were in the comments, obliterating her. And I'm not saying that either is right or wrong. I'm just simply saying that from a Black women's perspective of persistence and survival, some of the things that this white woman triathlete was bringing up as concern to her was like
Mm-hmm.
frivolous. Like, the most you got to do is tell the chef what to cook. I trained at 4 o'clock this morning. I did that, those types of
Yeah.
things.
Yeah.
I think, and this is not a put down of anybody. It's just to say our starting points are different as to what
Mm-hmm.
hardship, resistance, persistence, leisure are.
Yeah. Yep.
Like I will tell you, Lisa, you ask me, what'd you do today? Oh, I just chilled at home. Chilled at home probably meant, yeah, I probably cleaned the whole house, but that was chilling for me compared
Right.
to
Right. Chilling for someone else. Yeah.
like chilling for somebody else would literally be holding down the couch. It's like, no, I cleaned my house today and I did this and da, da, da. It just depends on your starting point, I guess. So
Yeah. Yeah.
anyway, all that to say is that first of all, I just wanted to highlight Actively Black. Go check it out. In their in their on their homepage, they make it very specific that they are uplifting the Black community. However, being pro-Black does not mean that they are anti anybody else. If you love and support Black people, Actively Black clothing is for you. So please don't think only Black folks can buy it. Okay. So go check Actively Black out. And then the other piece is to think about the Black women around you that may be looking for the right to rest and not requiring them or forcing them to think that they don't have that option.
Yeah.
That's what I would
Yeah.
say. So,
Yeah.
all right, Lisa, get us into phase 2.
Okay. So we recently had the birthright citizenship case at the Supreme Court. So that was argued. It's not looking good for the Trump administration. The Solicitor General had a little bit of an uphill battle trying to argue that the plain text of the 14th Amendment did not mean what the plain text said. But that's not the case I want to talk about. We won't hear on that one until probably June. My guess is they're going to drag their feet because it's such an explosive case. The result is probably going to come out late June, maybe even early July. But we did get they did hand down a result in Chiles versus Salazar on March 31st. This case, I think you and I did talk about, or we at least mentioned maybe earlier on. But this is the case where a therapist here in Colorado was challenging Colorado's law that bans the use of conversion therapy in clinical treatment by licensed mental health professionals. And so for those of you who don't know, conversion therapy is a type of modality where the therapist or clinician is essentially trying to, quote unquote, convert a lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender person, asexual person to identify as cisgender and or heterosexual, right? So this idea that those other identities, like non-normative sexual and gender identities, are wrong, and that you need to be ashamed of that, and you need to be quote unquote normal, right? And so the Colorado banned this for minors. It did exclude religious organizations. So if you're a pastor or a priest and that's, something that you're providing your parishioner or whatever, then you weren't prohibited by this law. So anyway, Kaylee Chiles is the therapist here in Colorado, and she challenged this law, saying it was a violation of her free speech because therapy is talk, right? Because you're talking with a client. Therefore, Colorado is impermissibly restricting her speech. And the court found 8-1 in her favor. So, So what's interesting about it is that the court didn't actually say Colorado's law and others like it, I think 20 other states have similar laws, is unconstitutional. What they said is because it burdens a therapist's free speech rights, you have to apply the highest level of scrutiny, which is strict scrutiny. So they sent it back to the district court to re-review the law using that standard. Now, the government can infringe upon a person's constitutional rights and beat strict scrutiny if they can show that they have a compelling interest. So you could argue there's a compelling interest here to regulate this particular modality because there is well-documented research that shows the harm that conversion therapy does to LGBTQ youth. For example, LGBTQ youth who have experienced conversion therapy are more than twice as likely to attempt suicide and more than 2.5 times likely to report multiple suicide attempts in the past year. That's from the Trevor Project. The American Psychiatric Association, the American Psychological Association, and the American Medical Association have all condemned the practice of conversion therapy. So there is a long history here of this not being an effective treatment modality. But the court is saying because the predominant tool with which this therapy is being provided is speech, it therefore must be protected to this higher level, right? So what was interesting is that it was 8-1. So Ketanji Brown Jackson was the only justice who dissented, and then Sonia Sotomayor and Elena Kagan concurred, but they wrote, I think they were trying to hedge. They were trying to do something here by basically saying that in the same way that a state cannot regulate speech based on viewpoint, because the argument was this therapist's desire to explore sexuality is viewpoint discrimination. The same would be true if a state created a law that prohibited therapists from affirming a youth or a minor's gender identity or sexual orientation, right? So if you go to, so I think that's what they were trying to do, was to say this is applicable across the board. So you can't have a law that prohibits it, and you can't have a law that says you can't affirm, right? I don't know how likely it is that a state would pass a law telling therapists they can't affirm a child's sexual orientation, but who knows, because we are in, some warped timeline when it comes to that stuff. But so I wanted to read you a couple of things related to Justice Jackson, because of course she's amazing. So she said, stated simply, the majority has failed to appreciate the crucial context in which Chiles's constitutional claims have arisen. Chiles is not speaking in the ether. She is providing therapy to minors as a licensed healthcare professional. Further, she says, the 10th Circuit, which is the appeals court from which this case came, was correct to observe that there is a long-established history of states regulating the healthcare profession. And until today, the First Amendment has not blocked their way, for good reason. Under our precedents, bedrock First Amendment principles have far less salience when the speakers are medical professionals and their treatment-related speech is being restricted incidentally to the state's regulation of the provision of medical care. She ends her dissent with saying, to do anything else, which would be to find the way the court did, opens a dangerous can of worms. It threatens to impair the state's ability to regulate the provision of medical care in any respect. It extends the Constitution into uncharted territory in an utterly irrational fashion, and it ultimately risks grave harm to Americans' health and well-being. So the thing I would love, just to get your reaction, Shauna, to this case, but also I want to kind of thought experiment with you. If we can regulate a therapist's speech, because talk therapy is primarily speech, and we can look at that as not as a modality of a licensed clinical professional, what other medical speech then could be impacted by this decision, do you think?
Oh gosh, medicals, well, damn near anything, in my
Mm-hmm.
opinion. I feel like almost everything can be regulated, or put it this way, attempted to be regulated. Um, but and the reason why I say attempted to be regulated is because as you were speaking, I'm thinking, but how would you enforce this exactly? Unless someone filed filed with or sued um, for them to lose their license of some sort, how would you even know that? Um, Most folks that are looking for medical care can barely afford the medical care, much less
Right,
then turn
right.
around and sue you for anything that you said that has now been regulated. So I'm like, how do you even control that exactly or check for that? But the other piece is okay. So you're asking about different medical functions. It could be damn near anything. I mean, it could be
Mm-hmm.
any medical professional. It could be speech therapist. It could be I'm thinking down the list of all the folks that we would engage with. Almost every medical professional.
Yeah, right.
And so with that, go with me and then I'll come back. It's right now what's being happened is that a number of credentials are being pulled for example, chaplains in the military. They're being pulled. Why? Because they're the only people that are exempt from reporting certain things, right?
Mm-hmm.
If I am your pastor or your, imam or what have you, then I'm exempt from reporting certain things that you might share with me in confidence.
Mm-hmm.
Similarly, I feel like it's a parallel conversation to be had. If you try to take the credentials of medical professionals to even have these conversations, first, how do you enforce it? But secondly, what's not being shared that could literally be life or death situations that prevent care in very restrictive ways. I'm like, oh, I'm not comfortable with that. If this comes down where, let's say there are 10 options to save my kid's life, but you're only able to share three of them with me, and they're the most risky of the 10, I don't want to hear that. I want to hear all the options that are available to me. And then I get to decide. So it just, this authoritarianism perspective of the world is now I mean, it's everywhere, but for
Yeah.
those of us who are already on the margins of health equity to begin with, I feel like it 10x's the risk of almost everything.
Yeah, and I think in the example you just shared with the 10 possible solutions, this decision would require that medical professional give you all 10. And if five of them are kooky shit, right, and are dangerous or not, like, I think, but they would argue that, so you could extend the argument that you can't regulate a medical professional from giving you these 10 options, even though five of them are utterly ridiculous, because that would be an infringement of their free speech rights. And so,
Right.
yeah, you're right. And you think about vaccinations, right? So
Yes.
is it viewpoint discrimination to regulate medicine and MDs in terms of their they need to recommend vaccinations to young children versus talk parents out of it? Like, I'm not sure what the law is around that, but let's just say that there is a state regulation that says medical professionals must provide new parents with information on how to get vaccinated, including, this, that, and the other. And then
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
an MD sues saying, I don't want to recommend vaccinations. That's a violation. That's a viewpoint discrimination because my viewpoint is that vaccinations are dangerous. Right?
Right. Right. Exactly. Exactly. So then, well, I'm thinking about my dad's treatments over the last few months for stage
Mm-hmm.
4. He's doing great, y'all, for those that are listening. So we're grateful. And at the same time, every time there's been an adjustment or a change in treatment, his doctor will come in and say, these are A, B, C, and D options. I'm not a fan of C and D, but you still have that. Like, it wasn't like he didn't hear it. He heard it.
Mm-hmm.
So my dad truly could select C and D, even if they were the kooky options. At least he heard them to even choose from. And so, yeah, maybe I'm much more flexible in this area than most, where, if a doctor said, look, if it were my dad, Shauna, I would go with A and B. These are options C and D, just so that you're aware of them. Like, I think it depends on the delivery and the bedside manner of the doctor. And some doctors, I'm not sure if they are equipped. First of all, bedside manner is another conversation, but are they equipped to deliver information in such a way, which they are not, I do not believe, in such a way that you're providing options, giving the pros and cons of all of them, and still letting the individual make the choice on their own with full information.
But what about in a situation with your dad where your doctor was a cancer doctor? This might be an unlikely scenario, right? But and they don't believe in chemotherapy. They believe in cancer treatment that is just take some more vitamin D or
Mm-hmm.
whatever, right? Like some other something, but
Yeah.
they don't believe in
Mm-hmm.
chemotherapy. So they don't even tell you and your dad about chemotherapy. They just
Therein
tell
lies the
you
problem.
about,
Yes.
yes, yeah,
Therein lies the problem right there.
because
Therein lies the
it's
problem.
speech, right? And you don't get to tell me as a doctor, you don't get to
Mm-hmm.
regulate what medical advice. Um,
Exactly.
and
Well, and
otherwise,
I've done
yeah.
that before as a Black woman dealing with, at that time there were some not major complications but small complications after the birth of Kendrick, and they gave me three options on something. This particular doctor happened to be white, so please just know, remember, this is a Black woman looking through the lens of Blackness at a white doctor in this country. Let me just paint that picture.
Hmm. Hmm.
And he gave three options. One of them was one that he would not advise, and that was the one I was most comfortable with. So
Mm.
that has actually happened to me, and I said, I'm going with kooky C.
Yeah.
And thank goodness everything has been fine. That's been what Kendrick is almost 12, so that's been almost 10 years ago now. But yeah, I have been in that situation where I chose the less supported option of my doctor because I didn't feel comfortable with the other ones. It was something about pain tolerance where it was like this one might be more painful, but be more effective down the long term. And I'm thinking to myself, nah, black women in this country are known for telling y'all that we're on a level 12 out of 1 through 10 in our pain, and you act like we didn't feel a thing. I don't
Yeah.
trust that. I'm going with the kooky C, and I'm cool with that. So, but again, it depends on how confident you are, because there are some people that are not as confident. Here we go with agency again, not confident enough to exercise their agency to advocate for themselves as far as what they want to do.
Yeah, and you think about how much medical regulation there is out there, right? Like medical
Mm-hmm.
malpractice. Like there are laws that prevent doctors and therapists from doing certain things, which is exactly what this conversion therapy one was, because those certain things have been proven through research to be detrimental and harmful. And
That's
so if
right.
we now understand those laws that regulate healthcare and medical
Mm-hmm.
practice to be a violation of a doctor's or a clinician's or a therapist's free speech, then is this now going to handcuff the state's capacity and all of these medical and psychiatric and psychological associations from setting standards of care and standards of practice, right?
Right.
And I know that's an extension of this case, and it may not, but that's essentially what Justice Jackson was arguing in her dissent, was that that's the can of worms, right? That you've opened.
Mm-hmm.
Because the way I look at it is conversion talk therapy, sure, it is speech, but it is a treatment modality in the same way
That's
that
right.
a flu shot is a treatment modality, right?
There you go. There you
Just
go.
because it's talk doesn't mean it shouldn't be subject to these standards of care, standards of practice that are rooted in evidence, right? But that's
Yeah.
not how the
Yeah. It's
Supreme
a
Court came
tool.
out on it.
It's a
Yeah.
tool. Yep. Exactly. It's a tool. So, yep. I got you. Well, Katanji and they stay trying to save us. Since we were talking about
Yeah.
Superwoman,
Yeah.
yeah, they stay trying to save us to give the other. So I understand the hedging, though. I do understand the hedging, and it's like, your voice, the conversation itself, the speech itself is, as essential as a scalpel is to a surgeon. I mean, it's like
Yeah. Yeah.
it's the tool with which you are treating
Exactly.
a person.
Exactly.
And so what happens when, it's like, oh, you have three tools, but I'm choosing this one, or I'm pushing this one rather than the others. That's not full information. It's almost like when we do research, Lisa, where we have the leading question. Like we're leading them to the answer we want them
Yeah.
to get,
Yeah.
having them to answer from a more neutral perspective. Not okay with that. Not okay with
Yeah.
that. All right. Well, we need to continue to watch that space.
Absolutely. Watch that space. Yeah.
Look, can somebody give me a job just observing and monitoring SCOTUS so we see what's coming down? I mean, we could just do that every day and pod about it. Well, that's what we should be doing. Mhm. All right. Well, with that, that's it for this week, y'all. Black
Mm-hmm.
women and SCOTUS and oh gosh, it's tough. Y'all know that we literally could podcast every day and never run out of material. I mean, we
Mm-hmm.
really could. But we appreciate you listening in with this episode. You can certainly reach us on all of your favorite social media and podcast apps at Unfazed Unedited, or you can simply email us at info@unfazedpodcast.com with ideas, words of the week, so forth.
Mm-hmm.
Our website, unfazedpodcast.com, where you can access the new and the old shows. And if you like this week's episode, just like, subscribe, leave a review, share with your friends, coworkers, or others in this phase of your life. So until next time.
All right. See you next time.